Yep, okay. Let's make a start. It's good to see you all, and welcome to, regrettably, the last of our 5 series of sessions on marriage. Questions and comments through the Zoom chat as before, please. And we look forward to a really interesting talk on marriage and Islam by Imam Khurram. And could I ask you, if you would please first, Khurram, to say a few words about yourself before you begin your talk?
So I'm just going to introduce myself again. My name is Imam Khurram, and I'm serving as Imam at the Ilford Islamic Center for the last 5 years. And I also had the opportunity to be the mayor's chaplain of the Redbridge Mayor, Councillor Zulfikar, for this year. Because of the COVID, his term has been extended. Before that, I was an imam in Waltham Forest for 1 year at one of the largest mosques here. It's also known as the Redbridge Mosque. And before that, I was up north in Manchester, and I was serving as an imam for a few years in Manchester. I also have a background of youth work. I did my degree, my BA in youth and community work, and I'm currently studying my master's in Islamic studies here in London. I don't have that much wealth of experience compared to most of you here. As you can see, I'm not that old. So hopefully I'm hoping to gain more experience and knowledge from yourselves. So I don't want to take too much of your time. So we're just going to go straight into this session on marriage in Islam. I'm quite nervous, and the reason for that is because my presentation or the session is the last session. So everyone before me has actually set a standard. So I'm not sure whether I can meet that standard or not. And the second reason why I'm nervous is because, as you know, Islam has been under the spotlight for the last 20 years after 9/11. A lot of scrutiny, a lot of, you can say, misconceptions, and a negative portrayal of the faith. And then we know that there's been extremism and the rise of Islamophobia. So I know there's going to be a lot of questions, a lot of things that I might need to clarify. So what I'll do is I'm just going to briefly go over marriage and some of the things that happen. Before that, I just want you to understand a few things before we get into the actual part on marriage, and then hopefully we'll have some time for the question and answers. What time would you like me to finish the presentation, Oren, or whoever's hosting?
Whatever time you need, I think. So it depends how much you have. Usually, okay. I think we did around 40 minutes presentation, and then we left at least 20 minutes for questions, because I assume that some people may need to leave at 8:30. So
okay, so that's fine. All right, thank you. You can stop me in between if you need to. Okay, first of all, let's understand, and this is the introduction that I want to give, some of the things that we're going to cover. First of all, we're going to look at source of Islamic law, and this is mainly something that you would have heard the name Sharia. So we're going to talk briefly about that. Significance of marriage in Islam, purpose of marriage, and then we're going to get into some of the ceremonies that take place. So for example, engagement, the nikah ceremony. Marriage in Islam is also known as nikah. There's a walima. This is like a banqueting feast that takes place after the nikah. and then we'll go into some of the roles and responsibilities of both spouses or husband and wife, and then finally on some of the issues of divorce. So Islam, as most of you would know, is the second largest religion in the world, and it's also one of the Abrahamic faiths. It's a monotheistic faith, so we believe in one God. And the reason why we say Abrahamic is because we have a lot of common beliefs and understanding and some practices as the Jewish faith and the Christian faith, and we believe in many of the prophets as well, and also Revelation. And one of the common prophets that we have is Prophet Abraham. So this is also known as one of the Abrahamic faiths. We have the belief that the Holy Quran, which is the sacred book, was the final revelation from God for the guidance of mankind, and it was revealed to Prophet Muhammad, and he is, as we believe, the final prophet in the series of prophets. So we believe that there have been approximately 124,000 prophets that came for the guidance of mankind, and from amongst these 124,000 prophets, some of the prophets that we believe in are Prophet Moses, Prophet Jesus, Prophet Ishmael, Prophet Isaac, Prophet David, Prophet Solomon, and we also believe that Prophet Adam was the first man and also the first prophet, we believe him to be. Sharia. Now, what is Sharia? This is a word that you would have heard, and mainly with a negative connotation. But actually, Sharia loosely is translated as Islamic law, and this is probably the most closest translation that you can find for this, as being Islamic law. However, it covers all aspects of life and is not limited to one particular aspect. Whenever Sharia is mentioned, automatically people's mind normally goes towards one aspect of Sharia or Islam, which is mainly to do with laws of governance. But Sharia actually covers all aspects of life. So we have laws regarding, worship. We have laws regarding domestic life, laws regarding public life. So it is actually covering all aspects of life. And Sharia sometimes is interchangeably used to mean Islam as well. So when we say Sharia, we also mean Islam. So when we hear this slogan, or when, for example, you find far-right movements, when they have been protesting and they have been saying that we don't want Sharia, they're actually saying we don't want Islam. So this is something that I think needs to be clarified in the public domain, that Sharia is also Islam. And they're interchangeably used with each other. Sharia is, you can say, guidelines, or they are a set of laws that Muslims follow, and Islam is the name of the religion. There are 5 objectives of Sharia, 5 objectives of Islamic law: preservation of life, preservation of religion, preservation of wealth, preservation of family, and preservation of intellect. So you would find that in Islam, you have the laws that you have all evolve around preserving these 5 objectives. So they're known as the maqasid of Sharia. So they're known as the objectives of Sharia. So Islam, through all of the laws that it has, it aims to protect and preserve these 5 objectives. So how is this relevant? This is relevant because marriage and family, mainly 2, you can say, of these objectives are covered by that: preservation of religion and also preservation of family. So through marriage, these 2 objectives of Sharia are preserved. Sources of Islamic law. There are 4 sources of Islamic law. 2 are primary, 2 are secondary. The Holy Quran, which is the holy book, and the life of Prophet Muhammad. And we actually have the entire life of the Prophet Muhammad preserved. So from the day he was born till the day he passed away, we have all of the Prophet Muhammad's life preserved. And this is in the Hadith literature. And so the Prophet Muhammad's sayings, the Prophet Muhammad's practice, his actions, and if anything happened in front of the Prophet and he approved or disapproved, this also becomes part of Islamic law. So the Holy Quran and the life of Prophet Muhammad are the primary sources that Muslims look at in order to follow their religion. And then there's 2 secondary sources. Ijma, this means the consensus of Islamic jurists. So those people who are qualified to interpret the Holy Quran and the Hadith, or the sayings and actions of the Prophet. So those who are qualified to extract rulings, if they together agree on something, there's a consensus upon something, this also becomes part of law. And finally is qiyas. Qiyas means analogical deductions. That means that if, for example, there is a new matter that arises, a new challenge that arises, and there is no direct reference of it in the primary sources, then the scholars of the time would make analogy on a previous ruling. So for example, we have this in every court of law. Even in English law, we have judicial precedent, which means when there is a new case that arises, judges, they look at a previous case that was decided that is similar, and they would base the ruling upon that. And why are these important? Because this is to do with modern challenges, and this is to do with new issues that arise for Muslim communities. So for example, if Muslim communities find themselves as a minority, then they would look at new challenges that they are facing as a minority, and they would deduce rulings from their previous sources in order to come up with new solutions to issues that are arising. So this is just some of the technical stuff which I wanted to clarify before we go on to the marriage and what happens. And the reason why I wanted to do that was so that we are actually prepared to understand that some of the rulings that there are regarding or laws regarding family life and marriage life, some of them there are orthodox views, traditional views, and there's others which are contemporary views, and some people are going towards, or scholars are going towards, a reformed understanding based upon new challenges. Okay, so significance of marriage in Islam. First of all, as I mentioned before, marriage is known as nikah in the Arabic, and nikah basically is a sacred bond between 2 people. And in the Holy Quran, God calls this sacred bond of marriage as mithaqun ghaliza, which means a strong binding contract. And marriage is also like a contract between 2 people. And there is a warning for Muslims in the Holy Quran that you need to be true to your contract. And any contract that is made between people, you must always be conscious that God is aware of that contract. So by God mentioning a particular word in the Quran, it's called mithaqun ghaliza. It means a strong binding contract. This is the same word that God has used for when he sent prophets to this world to fulfill their duties. And God says that when he sent them into the world to fulfill the duties, he took from them a strong binding covenant, and he used the same word. So the same word that he used for to mention about the covenant that he took from prophets to fulfill their duties that God has sent them upon earth to fulfill, he uses the same word for marriage, that this is also a contract between two people, and they have a great responsibility in order to fulfill those responsibilities for a successful and a peaceful marriage. So it's a sacred bond between two people. It's also significant in Islam because we recognize the power and existence of God. And how do we do that? There's a verse that is mentioned at the bottom from chapter 4, verse 1 of the Holy Quran, where God actually commands the whole of mankind that be conscious of your Lord, who created you from a single soul and then created from it his spouse. So this is referring to Prophet Adam and his wife Eve, or Hawa, we call in Islam. And this is the creation story, the beginning of the human race. So the single soul here is Prophet Adam. So he was created without any mother and father. So he was created by God directly. So he was the first human being, and then created from it his spouse. So the single soul, Prophet Adam, created from him his spouse, meaning Eve. And this is similar to the biblical tradition as well. And here I just want to mention that Eve being created from Prophet Adam, and we know there's a similar understanding that she was created from the rib of Prophet Adam. What we understand from that is that she being created from the rib actually means and signifies that because she was created from the most closest part of the part which is to the heart, therefore the affection, the love, the link that these two, the man and the woman, have towards each other is the fact that she was created from a part which is the closest to the heart, and therefore there's that inclination between the two, and we also understand from this is that the woman and the man, both of them play an important role in each other's life because they are part of each other, and therefore and we don't believe that she is inferior to the man, but rather we believe that she plays an important role in the life of man. And we often hear that behind every successful man there is the hand of a woman. We always hear this, and to some extent that can be true. And then God says, and then he brought forth from them many men and women. So this here God is talking about the creation of the human race. So from Prophet Adam was created Eve, and then when they both came together, they married, and then from them there was the offspring, the children of Adam, and this is the human race. So what God mentions here is be conscious of your Lord. So this being conscious of God is referring back to recognizing and being aware that God can create, number one, and secondly, that marriage itself is a sign of the existence of God himself. So this is why marriage is significant for Muslims. Number three, it's a practice of prophets. So we know that many prophets married and they had family. And some are exceptions, like Prophet Isa, Jesus Christ, he did not marry. Also John the Baptist, whom we know as Prophet Yahya, peace be upon them, did not marry. So, but most of the other prophets, they did marry. So it's a prophetic practice. And because prophets are role models, prophets are the best of people to walk on the surface of this earth, and they were sent as guides for mankind. Because it's their practice, this also signifies for the followers that they should also follow this practice. And number four, a completion of half of one's faith. So in Islam, being married is actually equal to completing half of one's faith. And this is a saying of the Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessing be upon him, that when you marry, you complete half of your religion. One of the reasons for that is because by getting married, a person saves themselves from sin and being engaged in unlawful relationship or premarital relationships and fulfilling their desires in that way. So by marrying, a person completes one half of their faith. And then the Prophet said, now for the other half of your faith, be conscious of your Lord, or fear your Lord. And this is referring to fulfilling your responsibilities now as husband and wife. So you complete the other half of your faith by fulfilling each other's responsibilities, or living a blissful and happy life, and treating one another in the best of way. So here, completing half of one's faith actually shows the extent of seriousness for a Muslim when they marry, that the burden of responsibility of marriage is not something that should be taken lightly or as a joke, but rather marriage is something serious. Why? Because you are completing half of your religion by marrying. And now for the other half of the religion, you have to help each other to complete that half of faith. And finally, on this point, a person remains in a state of worship to God. So for Muslims, being married is a form of worship of God. And as I mentioned before, because you recognize the power and existence of God, and it's from amongst the signs of God. So that's the first thing, you're being conscious of God all of the time. Number two, because you treat it as the completion of half of your faith, and now you are striving to complete the other half of your religion, you remain in a state of worship. Also, there is also something in the Islamic tradition where the scholars have said that marriage is the only worship. Marriage is the only worship that began before this life. So in the beginning of creation, and it's a worship that will remain even after life. So even in paradise, people will marry. Every other type of worship that we do on earth will finish. For example, when we pray, we fast, we perform pilgrimage, all of these are forms of worship that are limited to this life in this world. But marriage is such a worship that it started in heaven in the beginning of creation between Adam and Eve. And it is something that we also do on this in this world. And after we pass away in the afterlife, we will be marrying again in paradise. So this is a form of worship that will continue even in the afterlife. So this is why it is very significant within the Islamic tradition. What is the purpose of marriage? Some of these things I've mentioned before. So protecting one's chastity, so meaning through marriage, one makes it lawful to fulfill that desire that God has put within the man and the woman to fulfill lawfully. So this is one of the reasons. Number two, procreate, to contribute towards the continuation of the human race. And this is something which we all understand, that through marriage we contribute to the continuation of the human race, to have children, to have a family. And the third point here is what I mentioned about the objectives of Sharia, which is preservation of family and lineage. So through marriage, a person preserves family. So they fulfill one of the objectives of Islam, which is preservation of family and also lineage. Lineage is very important because it's to do with the identity of a person, is to do with living a healthy life where a person knows where they've come from, who their parents are, who their grandparents are. So that protection of lineage is very important in Islam. So similarly, the preservation of the family. So utmost effort would be made to keep this institution healthy. And finally, living a tranquil life. And this is actually from a verse of the Holy Quran, which I've mentioned at the bottom, chapter 30, verse 21. And amongst God's signs is that he created for you spouses from amongst yourselves, meaning from the human race. Again, it refers back to Prophet Adam and Eve. so that you may dwell in peace with them. And he has put between you affection and kindness. Indeed, in this are signs for those who reflect. So in this verse, God mentions that the purpose of creating spouses for you is that you may dwell in peace with them. And how to bring about this peace in one's life and family, God gives us two ingredients here. He says, and he has put between you affection and kindness. So love and compassion are two ingredients which bring about a healthy family, which bring about love and tolerance within a family. And something which was mentioned, I think, by Carol in her presentation, where she mentioned that societies are made of families. And so societies are made of families, communities are made of families. So if a family institution there's peace in a family, there will automatically be peace in a neighborhood. And when there's peace in a neighborhood, there will automatically be peace in the society, and so on and so forth. Finding a spouse. So now we're going on to what steps are taken in a marriage, or how the whole thing around the marriage in Islam and how it comes about. So finding a spouse, this is the first thing. So parents can find a potential spouse for their children, or an individual can find their own potential spouse. And this, again, we're looking at the point that I want to clarify here is about the arranged marriage and forced marriage. What we must understand is forced marriage is totally prohibited in Islam. Forced marriage is totally prohibited, even in the Holy Quran, where God mentions in chapter 4 that do not inherit women against their will. So forced marriage is totally against Islam. And similarly, there was in the life of the Prophet, a woman came to the Prophet and she said that my father has forced me to marry someone. Now the Prophet gave her a choice. Do you want to stay with him, or do you want to leave him? And she said that I want to stay with him, but I only wanted for everyone else to know, because he's a good man, I want to stay with him. But the only reason why I've raised this issue is so that everyone else could know that no one can force their children to marry. And in another similar incident, someone came to the Prophet and said, my parents have forced me to get married, and I have no inclination to my husband or this person. The Prophet revoked her marriage. So again, it shows that forced marriage is not permissible in Islam. Consent of both parties is essential. And again, parents can find a potential spouse. So this is arranged marriage. Now, arranged marriage is different. And what you will find is similar to other religions as well, that marriage is arranged in the sense that all of the the ceremonies, or all of the when families get together, they agree on dates, or they agree on a time, or they agree on how to go about this. This all comes under arranged. So everything is arranged in that way. But there's a difference between arranged marriage and forced marriage. There has been, in particular cultures, there is the concept of forced marriage, but this isn't Islamic. Maybe in certain Muslim societies, in particular parts of the world, they do practice forced marriages, but this cannot be misunderstood to mean that it is because of Islam that they are doing this. Islam completely prohibits forced marriage. Yes, arranged marriage is permissible, but again, the consent of both parties is essential. An individual can find their own potential spouse. So if a person wants to find their own spouse, they can do so. However, one must take their time to do a background check on the individual and family. So a person should do all of their research, and until they are satisfied that this person or this family that I will be marrying into you know, they are good people, and they are people who you know, that will care for me, or I will not have any issues in the future because of their, I don't know, character or any other background. Maybe that person has a criminal record or whatever. So a person should take their time in order to a background check. But what is not allowed here is going on dates. So you know, dating that person for a specific amount of time. So dates will not be allowed. Yes, you can meet that person, but it should not be in isolation, but rather in a public place. You meet someone, you can talk to them. These meetings can be arranged through family. These meetings can be arranged through friends and relatives. So a person can engage with the other person, meaning communicate with their potential spouse through various means, but they would need to take certain things into consideration, that they don't fall into you know, things like going on dates and doing you know, or getting into a relationship which will have a emotional kind of you can say effect on them later on if the marriage does not go through. Some of the recommended you can say traits for compatibility, it's recommended to look for some of these things so that the marriage is not harmed in the future. Number one, religion. Number two, family. Number three, physical attraction. Number four, financial standing, wealth. And number five, character. So these are some of the traits to look for compatibility. If and we know that if certain things where there is no compatibility, and some of these things can have issues in particular families, and they could cause a breakdown in marriage. Something that we also need to understand in Islam, marriage, although it's between two people, but it always encourages not to break any ties of relationship. So whatever, you know, for example, parents or siblings or even extended family, those that are related, Islam never encourages to break ties of kinship, never break ties of relationship. But every single person within a person's family should be given respect and position according to who they are and their relationship to that person, and it should never be expected by the other person as well, the spouse. So for example, a wife should not or a husband is not expected to break ties with parents, and a wife should not demand that, and vice versa. And a husband should never demand from the wife that you break all ties with your parents or relationship, but rather they should try their utmost to keep the family together. In the same way, we talk about in-laws, they should also try to keep you know, the family together. So they shouldn't force their son or their daughter to completely ignore you know, the husband's parents or the wife's parents, but rather mother-in-law, father-in-law, they should be treated just like they would treat their own parents. And similarly, siblings, you know, they should be given their own place within that relationship, because siblings, again, are part of an immediate family, so no one can be expected to break ties of kinship with their siblings. So there's a lot of emphasis on keeping the family together. So when you do get married, yes, this is a new step in your life, but at the same time, one must consider all of the other people that have been part of their life as well, and should not totally cut off from them. So this is why it's also important to look at these factors of compatibility. Again, it comes back to preserving family and not allowing the family institution to break down. That's why these traits should be looked into. There's other points of compatibility as well, but these five would suffice. Proposal for marriage. Now, there is a picture there, and if you can recognize, that's actually me. That's on my engagement. So proposal for marriage, this is so after, for example, someone has found a spouse, maybe the parents or the person themselves, then the next stage is the engagement stage. So what will happen is the proposal for marriage. Commonly, this is done by the male side, the groom side, but this is cultural. It's not religious. Anyone can propose, but what is commonly done is it's mainly done from the male side. So the proposal for marriage. We know from the Prophet Muhammad, his marriage to Khadija, his first marriage, she was the one who proposed to the Prophet first. So what we find from, as I mentioned before, the life of the Prophet as well, we find that his marriage, his first marriage, Khadija, his first wife, was the one who proposed to the Prophet. So it came from her, the proposal. So the bride side or the girl can propose first, but it's a in certain societies and in certain cultures, it's not the norm. However, Islamically, it is permissible that the bride can, or the girl side can also propose. Once both parties or families agree, then this becomes an engagement. So when both parties have agreed that they will marry, this commitment is made. It's actually a promise that is made between two people or two families. Now, it's the discretion of the families whether they want to have a celebration on this, whether they just want to exchange gifts like jewelry, clothes, or whatever type of gifts, just to make that commitment, or it can be just a verbal promise that both parties have agreed. And as you can see from my picture there, this was actually with the permission of my wife, actually. You can see that we had a small gathering in the house, just the immediate family, for that engagement as a expression of happiness. Okay, so next is, after this, there's something that takes place once they've agreed before the wedding. This again is a cultural practice and is not Islamic. This is a, for example, Mehndi or henna night. And this mainly takes place in the South Asian communities, India, Bangladesh, Pakistan. But there's also a similar kind of practice in the Arab world as well. But they have this henna ceremony after the actual marriage, after the nikah. But here there is a practice of having this kind of it's not a celebration, but it's more of an event where friends, neighbors, and close family, they come together and they have fun. There's entertainment, they apply henna, they play games, and this is mostly a girls' night. And sometimes boys have their own separate event, or sometimes they also partake in the same event. Again, there's some pictures from my own kind of Mehndi, although I was forced into doing this, but it was mainly my wife's night. But I was at another engaged in another event at the time with just my friends. But then she said, you have to come, and you can see she made the candles and herself and the cake as well there. So she did say to me, you know, you have to. So I came on that night to be part of this function for a brief moment. The reason why I'm saying this is because there's certain expectations of an imam, but at that time I was still a student, so I wasn't an imam. So in case someone says this is not Islamic, so why are you engaging in this? But what I would say is, any cultural practice, even if there's any cultural practice which does not violate any Islamic principles, it is permissible. Islam accepts any culture which does not contradict any principles or Islamic principles. Islam accepts that. So even this mehndi or henna night or whatever, although it's a cultural practice, but as long as there's nothing in there which is, that's why I've mentioned boundaries of what's lawful and unlawful should be considered. So anything which does not go against any Islamic principles, it is fine. So this is the mehndi. So it's a fun night, which some of you may have attended some of these events. This can take place in homes, and sometimes people, they do hire out venues in order to do this. In certain parts of the world, so for example in India or Pakistan, they have mehndi, or they have as a build up to the final day, they can have days and weeks of such celebrations. But again, it's all to do with how much a person can afford to, and Islamically, Islam doesn't place that burden upon people that you need to go extravagant, or you need to go that extra mile in order to appease everyone or have all of these celebrations. And the main two celebrations Islamically are nikah and walima, which we will come to after this. So nikah ceremony, the nikah ceremony, this is actually the main, you can say, part of the marriage. So nikah ceremony is the main thing. And what is the nikah ceremony? A nikah ceremony is where the vows are exchanged. So there's actually three components of the nikah ceremony. Number one is called ijab and qabul. This means offer and acceptance. This is actually vows. So where basically the exchange vows, or where the imam, for example, seeks the consent of the bride, and or the offer is made of whether the groom accepts the bride as his wife, and vice versa. So this is called ijab and qabul. This is the first important component of nikah. Number two is the mahr, which is a dowry or matrimonial gift. This is similar to what was mentioned by Rabbi Larry in the previous session, which was I think it was called the mahr. Similar, and this is called mahr, the dowry or matrimonial gift, and this is given by the groom's family to the bride as a gift, and this can either be deferred or non-deferred. So meaning it is paid on the day straight away, or it can be deferred to being paid later. But that is her right, that this gift is given to her. And number three is a khutbah, which is a sermon. So this is also part of the nikah. So the nikah is not complete without a sermon that is given mainly in the Arabic, but sometimes the imam can do it in a language which is, a common language of the people. So a sermon is also given. It's recommended to hold a nikah in the mosque on the day of Friday. And this is also this is only a recommendation, and it's optional. They don't have to. They can hold a nikah ceremony at any venue, at home, in a hall, in a restaurant, in the park or in the field or wherever it will be permitted for them to do so. But the recommendation to hold it in the mosque is, again, because we see nikah or marriage as a form of worship. Therefore, if it takes place in the place of worship or in the mosque, then there is more significance and blessing in that. And on the day of Friday, because Friday is a special day for Muslims. Some of you are probably thinking with the photo there, that was on my wedding day. Some of you may be thinking it doesn't look like him, but it is me. I was much younger then. And you probably be thinking he loves cakes. There was a cake in the previous one, and now there's a cake again. Sorry, these were the only photos I could find. Some of them, my missus has most of them. So this was the nikah ceremony. Okay, there are some people to be required. Their presence is required on the nikah. Although you can have as many guests as you want, depending on how much a person can afford or depending upon how much that venue can accommodate. But there are some essential people that are required to be present. Witnesses to the nikah, minimum 2 people. So if someone was to get married in just a small ceremony, the minimum requirement of witnesses is 2. Although if you have a larger gathering or a larger event, then everyone is a witness to that. But minimum, you need 2 people as witnesses. You have a wali. A wali is a parents or male guardian of a woman, and this is only for her security. So that no one can force her into anything, or no one can compel her in anything, or if there is anything objectionable on that day, the wali can acts as a guardian on that day. But this is not essential. This is only optional. If she gets married without a wali, this is permitted. In some, you can say, conservative schools of thought, they say the guardian needs to be present. But in the Hanafi school, which is the majority of the Muslims follow this school of thought, they say the wali does not need to be present if she is able to make her own decisions, and she is able to, and she has enough life experiences to make her own decision. She can also speak up for herself as well. So this is only required in certain situations. You also have a wakil, who is a representative for either side. So this is, for example, if one or both of the couple is not present, and the wakil can act as a representative on behalf of one or both of them. This sometimes, in certain cultures, for example, they may be in a separate room, for example, before the marriage, and this happens in certain cultures where on the wedding day the bride is in a separate room, and then the groom is in a separate area, and the representative acts on behalf of them. And once the nikah is done, both the bride and groom then come together, and they would sit on the stage or whatever, because now they are married. But this is again, it doesn't happen all of the time, and it's not in all of the cultures. In some Muslim cultures, there's no need for a representative. The wakil can also, a representative helps, for example, if there is any nikah that is happening over FaceTime or over video call, or over Zoom, and both the bride and groom are not present in the same place, but they're in different parts of the world. Or, for example, in lockdown, there have been many nikahs over Zoom. Now here, you would need a representative from both sides, for example, to verify that the people who are getting married, yes, they will verify their identity. So again, the wakil acts as a representative. And then you have an aqid, which is the contractor. This is mainly the imam. So what it means by contractor is the one who will have the contract signed or exchange of vows, and to make that commitment between and solemnize the marriage. So this is the aqid. So these are some of the required people to be present. There was just one point that I forgot to mention in the previous, where we said the mahar and the dowry. There is another practice which is found, but this is not Islamic, or it is Islamic, but it is not necessary, which is called jahez. This is more cultural. Jahez is where the bride or her side of the family is expected to give something to the groom side of the family, but this is a cultural practice. It's not an Islamic practice. but the mahr is actually an Islamic practice, and this is essential for the groom to give to the bride as a gift. I'm just going to show you some videos so you can have a feel of the nikahs. There's 3 videos here. They're quite short. They're happening at different venues. So one is in a mosque, one is in a garden, and one of them is in a hall. So just to give you an idea of how a nikah takes place. The only videos I could find, they are very cinematic, and most of them are like highlights of the nikah, because certain celebrations can take over over a couple of hours, so they're very condensed. So just to give you a feel of how nikah takes place. Are we okay for time?
My view, Khurram, is take as much time as you want. We are enjoying it enormously.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Let me see if this comes on. Can never get it right with them. Is there any other way to?
I think maybe you can try and click escape and go out of the presentation, and then just take this and copy paste it into the browser. Like stop the presentation and then sometime, yeah.
Surah Ar-Rum speaks about this occasion, and in particular speaks about this. I mean, you and your blessed wife, alhamdulillah, united together as one. And that union, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala describes this in Surah Ar-Rum. He says, all of what we see, we're out in the garden here, we can hear the birds chirping, we can see the trees, the greenery, the plants. This is all the natural kingdom of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. All of that is a sign of Allah's existence. But this coming together of 2 people, male and female, husband and wife, together, united in the eyes of Allah, he says, this is also one of my signs. And so my lesson, if you like, from this for you, and words of advice for both Rahim and Hasib, is that if that's how God is describing you, if that's how Allah is describing you, that you now, both of you together, are a sign of my existence, then what would say you now need to reflect His existence. Yusuf, son of Muhammad Yusuf, son, you are a sane adult Muslim person, and hopefully you understand what is required of you as you find yourself now in this new position as a husband in Islam. It leads me to ask you, Muhammad Hasib Yusuf, son of Muhammad Yusuf, son, have you accepted Rahim Sulaiman, the daughter of Muhammad Sulaiman, into your still living in this unprecedented and unique time. Allah.
So this was a marriage, I think, that happened in someone's garden, and you can see how the nikah was conducted. So this was the Imam who was conducting the nikah, and he was also during that gave a small sermon and video. It takes place in a mosque.
Marriage is a solemn covenant. It is mithaqun ghalidh, and it is a paradisial sunnah. It is a sunnah from the garden. وَمِنْ آيَاتِهِ أَنْ خَلَقَ لَكُم مِّنْ أَنفُسِكُمْ أَزْوَاجًا لِتَسْكُنُوا إِلَيْهَا وَجَعَلَ بَيْنَكُم مَّوَدَّةً وَرَحْمَةً إِنَّ فِي ذَلِكَ لَآيَاتٍ لِقَوْمٍ يَتَفَكَّرُونَ. Among God's signs, the heavens, the earth, the birds, the seas, everything created. Among His signs is that God created for you partners in marriage. God bless the both of you and bestow His grace upon you. May God join the two of you together in perpetual good.
तेरे कदमां च रख दे आसानी तेरे जिया नहीं तेरे जिया होर दिसदा किमें मुखड़े तो नजरां हटावां नहीं तेरे जिया होर दिसदा नहीं तेरे जिया होर दिसदा दिल करदा मैं तैनू वेखी जावां दिल करदा मैं तैनू वेखी जावां नहीं तेरे जिया होर दिसदा नहीं तेरे जिया होर दिसदा ममदानी बजाता ममदानी बजा छेती आजा हुण तक नहीं आरामा छेती आजा हुण तक नहीं आरामा नहीं तेरे जिया होर दिसदा नहीं तेरे जिया होर दिसदा
Okay, that was a nikah that took place in the mosque, but I take it this is not in England. It looks more like towards Morocco or something. And if you see the date as well, I think it was April 2019. So this was only last year. The person who was conducting that nikah is a famous scholar called Dr. Umar Farooq Abdullah. He's a convert. I think he's from in the States, but he's currently residing in I think Morocco. So that seemed like that. They wouldn't be having all of that, the song and the music, because this has been made as like a compilation. So there's the background, you can say, song and they've put into that. But it's just a feel of how the ceremony takes place, and then there's all of the other entertainment that comes with it, which is part of the Muslim cultural practice. As long as that, this final one that I want to share with you, is taking place in a hall, and it's conducted in a slightly different. Oops, what's happened here? Stop responding. If you've all got a feel of what actually takes place. Oh, it's
Today we have gathered here for a very important nikah or marriage. So I personally have verified with the bride herself, Sister Khadija Bey, in the presence of several witnesses, as well as her representative, Brother Mujahid Bey, has informed me and also signed the documents here that she is consenting to this marriage. As you have heard, Sister Khadija Bey has presented herself in your nikah. There is a matter which is agreed upon amongst yourselves. In the presence of the official witnesses and this wonderful gathering, I ask you, have you accepted Khadija Bey in your nikah? Yes, I have. Can you kindly repeat after me? Nakahtuha. نكحتها وقبلتها بارك الله لكما وبارك عليكما وجمع بينكما في خير. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless both of you and unite both of you in the marriage. Everybody say Ameen. blessing this marriage, this nikah. We are celebrating and sharing at this happy moment, and we're also praying for the couple that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless them, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala grant them a wonderful, successful marriage together, and may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give them the best in this world as well as in the everlasting life of the hereafter.
Okay, so you would have seen how the different ways of the nikah takes place. So in the last one, you saw that the bride was in a separate area first with her guardian and representative. So the Imam went over and sought her consent in the presence of witnesses, and then he came to the groom and asked for whether he accepts her marriage or accepts her in his marriage. And then thereafter, when he has accepted, they brought the wife in, and then she had an entrance, and then they were seated together on the stage. So in all three videos, we saw different types of ways the nikah is conducted. There's actually different ways, for example, in the Turkish tradition or in the Chechen tradition. But because we don't have enough time to go through that, you can search on YouTube and you can see the different ways in those nikah takes place. So the mosque one, you had the bride and groom together in one place, and then in the other one you had them in a separate area but within the same building. Again, this is cultural. After the nikah ceremony, you have something which is called a walima, and this is another essential celebration. So the nikah is actually the ceremony, and the walima is a celebration which takes place after the nikah. It can happen the following day, it can happen a week later, it can happen a month later, it can happen a year later, and sometimes the walima is done on the same day as the nikah ceremony, as for example, both of the families agree that it may cost too much to have them separately, so they might want to share the costs, so they would do the celebration. And plus, looking at the convenience of their guests, so they may have family traveling from far, from other parts of the country, or from even other parts of the world. They might want to participate in the marriage or the wedding, so they might keep it on the same day for the convenience of people. But walima itself is actually a wedding feast, and this is organized by the groom. It's his responsibility and the responsibility from his side of the family to arrange for a wedding banquet, and this is more like a feast. In the nikah, you don't necessarily have to have a banquet of some sort or a big celebration, but rather the nikah can be simple. It can be done with just the minimum required people, as I mentioned earlier, or it can be a celebration. So depending upon how much the family can spend or whatever, but it's not necessary. There's also the wedding, for example, the cost of the wedding and everything. It's actually, in Islam, it's actually the responsibility of the groom. The wife or the bride and her family are not burdened with this in Islam. However, if they agree, and this can be a mutual agreement, that and this happens, that the bride side say we'll pay for all of the costs in the wedding reception or the nikah ceremony, and the groom side can then do the walima, or they split the cost if they do on one day. But this again is to do with both families agreeing on something. But Islamically, it's actually the responsibility of the groom to provide for the wedding walima as well as for the nikah ceremony. What is walima? Walima is actually an expression of gratitude to God. So it's an expression of happiness as well as showing gratitude to God that God allowed us to get married. So it's an expression of that, and feeding people is one of the best way of expressing that gratitude, alongside prayers and saying thank you verbally. And the other purpose of walima is actually to publicize the marriage. In the nikah ceremony, what will happen is, if you are going to have a walima separate, in the nikah you will not invite that many guests. It will mainly be the immediate family or close friends, but in the walima you tend to invite more guests, those people that were not able to be present in the nikah. So this invitation extends to extended relatives and other friends that you want to be present. But in the nikah ceremony you will have less number of people. Again, it depends on how the families want to arrange that. Share happiness with the rest of family and friends. Recommended to invite the poor. So this is actually from a saying of the Prophet, that there is no blessings in a walima in which the poor are not invited and only the rich are invited. So it's actually to share the happiness with all of the community, not just those people who are influential in that society, or not those people who are only rich, but rather the poor should also be invited to such gatherings. And when the Prophet said this, obviously this was speaking at a time where the poor were not invited to such events. It's disliked to refuse a walima invitation. So if someone is invited to a walima, to a banqueting, it's actually disliked to refuse it, unless there is some sort of valid reason that someone cannot attend due to other commitments or for whatever reason. But it's disliked to just refuse it. Sorry, I won't be coming. Entertainment for guests. So this is optional. You can have entertainment. We saw in those videos as well, there was some sort of entertainment. But again, the entertainment, the boundaries of what is acceptable or lawful or unlawful has to be taken into consideration. So for example, alcohol and all of these things, they will not be permitted. However, entertainment again is allowed, but with boundaries. Roles and responsibilities. So after the marriage, the roles and responsibilities, relationship is based upon love, compassion, respect, and piety. What I tend to say whenever I'm invited, for example, to perform a nikah, or if a couple come for any advice or guidance, what I say to them is, look, marriage is not based upon do's and don'ts. It's not based upon a set of rules, but rather marriage is something that you need to look at and put the rules on the side for a moment. It's something that is mutual. It's something that comes about. If you love someone, if you have, if you show kindness to someone, there's no boundaries to kindness. So it's not about having the rule. It's more about conduct. Marriage is more about how you behave with each other. So there's a lot of emphasis on character. So for example, the Prophet Prophet Muhammad said that the best of you is the one who is best to his family. Or the Prophet said the most perfect of you in faith are those who are best in character. So character and conduct is very important within marriage. Both husband and wife have responsibility towards one another and family. So this includes the nurturing of children, raising children. Both husband and wife have an equal role in this, and both will be held accountable in the court of God if they lapsed in this. And in Islam, what is something that is seriously looked at is the accountability aspect of it in everything, that we will be held accountable for anything that we do. We will be answerable for anything that we do, which is good or bad. We will be asked about it by God on the day of judgment. So taking that into consideration, the Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessing be upon him, said that each one of you is a shepherd and you are responsible for your flock. So meaning the husband is the shepherd in terms of looking after his family, his wife and his children, maintenance and protecting them, and also paying attention towards the nurturing of the children, as well as their education, and anything around that. And similarly, the Prophet said about the wife as well, that she is also a shepherd and will be responsible for her flock, her responsibilities again towards her husband and family and children. There is something here which is that men are given or are obligated. This is a responsibility or that is made obligatory upon them by God. So they're described as qawwamun, which means maintenance of the family, maintenance of the wife. And this is providing for her lodging, for her food, clothing, maintenance for the whole family is the responsibility of the man. He's obligated. That's what it means. It's not the responsibility of the wife, but if she contributes towards the maintenance or towards the towards the family, then she will be highly rewarded for that, but she will not be accountable for anything. But the man, if he lapses in this, in providing, then he will be held accountable in the court of God. So the wife has actually been, this responsibility has been lifted from her by God. So Islam lifts that responsibility from her. She's not obligated to this, but if she does help, for example, the husband cannot provide, maybe his income is low, maybe he does not have, is unemployed or whatever. If the wife, is financially more stable, or she has a better job, or she can contribute, she can pay, but she's not obligated to. And if she does so, this will be regarded as charity on her behalf. And in terms of when I mentioned before that marriage is seen as a worship, there's a saying of the Prophet Muhammad that every morsel of food that you put into the mouth of your family, it will be rewarded as charity on your behalf. So every action that is done in terms of maintenance or in terms of looking after or caring will be regarded as charity on behalf of that person. So this is this word qawwamun, or this particular issue has been a subject of criticism, and it's because of a misunderstanding where it is seen as the wife has no say in the house. This is absolutely wrong, and it's absolutely a misunderstanding. Qawwamun actually means the responsibility, and the man is obligated and will be held accountable if he does not fulfill this responsibility. If a woman works or she contributes, then she will be highly rewarded for this, but she is not obligated to do so. After this is prophetic practice to actually help in the household chores. So this is actually a prophetic practice, and as I mentioned before, Prophet Muhammad's actions are also a source of law, and because the Prophet used to help in helping his in the home. So for example, we find a hadith which says that the Prophet used to wash his own clothes, the Prophet used to mend his own shoes, the Prophet used to patch his own clothes. So he used to work around in the house, and he would help. And there is something which is a recommendation that we find from the Prophet, is to share the duties between husband and wife to avoid any conflict. So for example, when one of the daughters, or the youngest daughter of the Prophet, Fatima, when she was married, the Prophet shared the duties between her and her husband Ali. And so he said to Ali that you bring, you go out and you earn, and when you come home, he said to his daughter that you prepare for him his food when he comes home tired. Now here, this was because the Prophet wasn't that he wanted to tell the people that no, it's the wife's duty to stay at home and do the cooking, but rather his point of doing that was to share the duties between them in order to avoid the conflict. So for example, if Ali was going out to to work or struggle to work, and he is coming home tired, and then he's having to do the house duties as well. It would have caused certain conflicts within the marriage. The whole purpose of this was what? This recommendation to share the duties, and there is nothing from the Prophet explicitly saying that this is what the man should do and this is what the wife should do, but rather this was only as a practice of his own in his household, or to his own daughter as a recommendation, so that it avoids any conflict within the marriage. Okay, so the final slide is about the divorce. It is permitted, but it is disliked by God. So what that means is, it's a saying of the Prophet Muhammad that from amongst the things which are permissible, divorce is the most disliked by God. So as much as one can avoid to go down this route of divorce, it should be avoided as much as one can, solely because of the preservation of a family coming under repute. So for example, one of the objectives of Sharia was what? Preservation of family. So in order to avoid family breakdown, one should avoid as much as they can. However, it does come to a point where it's after trying to reconcile and trying to have someone arbitrate between the spouses so that their marriage can remain intact. But after efforts, if that doesn't happen, then divorce, if it comes to a point where this is the only solution, then yes, they can divorce, and both men and women can initiate the divorce. There is some details to this, but obviously we don't have much time to go into the intricacies and the details. However, both men and women can initiate divorce. And what I do encourage whenever someone seeks my advice, I do say to them that make a the prenuptial agreements, have a contract, stipulate in there that if, for example, and this is for the security of the wife, if, for example, my husband does not fulfill my my rights, then I have the right to divorce him, or I have a right to get this divorce. And if that's written up as a prenuptial agreement, the husband has to follow through. There is other means, which is called the khula, where the dowry, if you remember, that is given by the husband in the nikah ceremony. This dowry also serves to help the woman in case when she seeks a divorce, both husband and wife can agree. If she says, I will return back the dowry that you have given me, in return I want the divorce, so that she can use that as a way of coming out of that marriage. Alongside the nikah, we also encourage that if they have a marriage registered, because nikah is not recognized under British law as marriage, so to have a civil marriage as well. Again, this helps in these situations, especially for divorce. Any type of domestic violence or abuse is not permitted. Again, this is another misconception regarding Islam, that is, in the Quran it mentions about the husband can hit the wife, or this is actually a misinterpretation of a word that is found in the Holy Quran, and that word has multiple meanings. And obviously, depending upon the time and depending upon people's culture, this has a lot of, you can say, influence in interpreting a certain texts. So at a time where violence or hitting, or this was the only way of reconciling, or reconciling, but a way of getting the marriage forward, people would use that means in that time. So they would interpret this word to fulfill their own kind of, you can say, or to justify their actions. But the reality is, all types of abuse and violence is not permitted, whether it's sexual, whether it's physical, whether it's emotional. And what we know, even from the life of the Prophet, he never ever struck a woman, he never ever hit a child, he never ever hit a servant. And the Prophet actually discouraged and he prohibited that one should be violent or should beat or any type of harm should come to anyone. So any type of domestic violence or abuse is not permitted. Maybe in the future, sometime when we have more time, we can go through this in more detail. It is permitted to remarry after divorce or after death of one's spouse. So if someone becomes a widow, they can remarry, and if someone is divorced, they can remarry. Any questions? I tried as much as possible to be brief on this. There will be a lot of things I have left out. Maybe that's found in the questions. So thank you for listening very attentively. I know I've gone over time here, but thank you for your patience.
Thank you very much, Khurram. We do have quite a few questions here from everyone. So if you're ready, I can start reading them to you. And
yeah, that's fine.
The first one was from Phil. You mentioned contract. Some recognize marriage as a covenant between the two spouses and God. Could you expand on this, please?
What I was meant to say was covenant. And the reason why I said contract is because there is there is an exchange of contracts, you can say. So as you saw in one of the videos, the nikah as well, when they're signing documents, this is a kind of a contract between the two that you will live together with these, for example, fulfilling the responsibilities, or the dowry that will be given, you accept, because there is finance involved in this. So the mahar, for example, the dowry, and one is offering this dowry. So in exchange of this dowry, it is being asked from the bride or the groom that, do you accept one another in marriage? So because there is a contract involved, we do say contract, but it is actually a covenant between two people.
Thanks.
Does that answer your question?
Phil, does it answer your question? I assume it does. Phil is muted.
Is Phil there, or has he left?
He's still there. Actually, Pratibha was asking something similar, and I wonder, Pratibha, if it answers your question as well. Isn't it contradictory that marriage is a contract and a worship?
No,
Sorry?
it doesn't. I think that doesn't answer my question. You said marriage is a contract, and you also said marriage is a worship. So
in terms of worship, what I mean by that is that when someone enters into this, they have to understand that they are not just doing so for the physical benefits of marriage, but rather the spiritual benefits of marriage as well. So if someone has the intention of getting married and they're doing so because for the sake of God, then any action that you do, even a worldly action that you do with the intention that you want to please God, is worship in Islam. So for example, if someone goes to work, although they are going to work for financial benefit, but if the person has the intention that I am going to work so that I can earn and I can feed my family, so that they can be nurtured into good human beings, and I'm doing this for the sake of God, and it's a command of God to me. Because of this intention, every time that person goes to work will be worship. It will be recorded as worship of God. So because, as I mentioned, Islam is we see complete way of life. So it's not limited to something that you do in the mosque or something you do at home, but rather it permeates every action of a person. So marriage would be seen as an act of worship, Why? Because you are fulfilling, you can say, you are fulfilling the responsibilities that have been put upon you as a husband and wife, and you are doing so for the sake of God, and not just for the sake of marriage. Does that answer your question?
Yes, it does. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Khurram. And Phil also mentioned in the chat that you answered fully his question, so he's sorry, he was just muted.
Thank you.
The next question was from me.
Okay.
You mentioned there that either the spouses or the families basically decide on the engagement, and I was wondering if the final decision on the engagement is of the couple of the family, or if the families can actually veto.
The final decision will rest upon the couple, because they're the ones that want to get married. However, what is encouraged is that the families, consultation and their kind of opinion and everything is respected, and they can object if there is any, if they can see any potential harm of two people coming together. If there is potential harm and they can see that, then they do have the right to object. They can't just veto or reject something, based upon personal reasons. Yes, if there are some Islamic reasons, because we have to understand marriage here, we're talking about Islamic marriage. So if there are any principles, that Islamic principles that maybe not being taken into consideration, then they can object to that. But the final choice is left to the spouses, if they want to go ahead with that marriage or not go ahead. But the family do have a right to object and to give their kind of voice their concern if there is for safeguarding of any one of them, or if there are any principles of their faith that are not being considered. But for personal reasons, they can't do so.
Thanks. The next question is from Vinaya. Are there any specific ceremonies or practices to certain groups like Sunnis or Shia or Ismailis?
To tell you the truth, I'm not aware of Shia practices, and if there are some, there will be some different ways of doing things. There is one thing that I know that is different between the Shias and the Sunnis is temporary marriages. Marriages which are which the Sunnis do not, they do not regard as permissible, you can say, but the Shias do, which is temporary marriages. So where two people, they agree to marry for a period of time, and for temporary basis. And the Sunnis do not permit that. In the Shias there is. In terms of practice, to tell you the truth, I'm not aware.
So can we assume that what you told us about this in presentation, it was talking generally mainly about the Sunnis?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Thanks. Khurram, maybe you, if possible, you can stop the sharing and then everyone can see.
Oh, okay. Sorry.
Whether it was.
Sorry. How do I? Shall I just?
You should have a button at the top to stop sharing. I can actually stop it.
Yeah, you can do it for me. Thank you.
It's better now. A question from Phil is the next one. I think actually it was shown in the video after he asked it, but
yes.
Some cultures signify a married person by the wearing of rings. Are there any specific symbols used in Islam?
Okay, in terms of, yeah, you would have seen in the video, yes, rings, jewelry, as I mentioned, the exchange of gifts happens, and rings is one of the ways to symbolize that they are married, yes, but it's not necessary. What was the other? There was, how are the secular?
Yes, another one from him, and I think you talked about it also at the end,
yeah.
how a secular, if registration is required in Islam, basically.
Yes, so the nikah, like I mentioned, is not recognized in British law as a legal marriage. So the couple would be seen as Islamically married, or according to British law, they would be cohabiting according to British law. So therefore, we would encourage couples to get a registration. In the mosque that I serve in Ilford, we have a license for registration as well. So if couples want to have their nikah and the registration, our mosque allows that, or you can say the registry office allows that, to have the registration there.
Thanks. Couple of questions from Vina. The first one, I think also you talked about at the end. So is the maher for divorce settlement, used in divorce settlement? And the second question is if you can clarify if more than one wife is allowed.
Okay, so in terms of meher, which is the dowry, it's a bridal gift, and it's not necessary for a divorce settlement. The dowry is actually a gift, and it's also security for the wife. So, for example, if the husband, goes away, or he goes missing, or he's not providing for her, he leaves her, and she finds herself in such a situation, then the dowry she can, will help her in terms of, for helping her with finances, or whilst the husband is absent, so that's one reason, the mahr. The other one, as I mentioned before, she can use that mahr to, if, for example, things are not working out, the husband is not agreeing to divorce, so she can say, look, I will give back your mahr that you gave me, the gift that you gave me, and we agree. So it can be used in order to come out of a marriage that she is not happy in. But it's not necessarily for a divorce settlement. If having the second question, if having more than one wife is allowed. This question, the way I want to answer this is, what we have to understand is Islam did not begin polygamy. It was already a practice that was happening, and it's something that is found within other faith traditions as well as cultural practices. What Islam did was, first of all, limit it to 4 wives. And you have to also, in the Quran, where it mentions in chapter 4, where it mentions about having more than one wife, there is actually a context to this. And the context was what? There was a battle that happened, there was a war that took place, and in that conflict, a lot of Muslim men died. And they left behind many orphans, they left behind many widows. So in order to protect the orphans, and the widows, in order for their protection, so that they have some sort of security, and we are obviously talking about a society where it was patriarchal, and it was a lawless society. So rather than the widowed women becoming left to the people, Islam encouraged. And if you look at the context of the verse where it mentions this, you can see the context is talking about that. And the verse in which it mentions about is also a conditional sentence. So for example, it says, وَإِنْ خِفْتُمْ أَلَّا تُقْسِطُوا فِي الْيَتَامَى, that if you are unable to be just towards the orphans, then fankihu ma taba lakum min, then marry the women 1, 2, 3, or 4. So it's a conditional sentence. And then within that verse, the next part of it, actually, God says, if you cannot do justice between them, then one is enough for you. So it's about being just to the wives as well. It's not so it's not talking about you can have more than one only to fulfill your desires, but rather it's talking about a particular context. It's talking about where there were for the security of the widows and the orphans, so that they have someone there to provide security for them. And secondly, if you cannot be just towards them. Now, justice, what is the equal treatment? What is the equal or equitable treatment between the wives if you have more than one? It's very, very likely that someone will be able to fulfill those conditions. So, for example, if someone gives a gift to one wife, he has to give the same value or the same gift or a gift of the same value to the others. Similarly with clothing, similarly with food, similarly with lodging. So it can become very difficult. So that's why God then says that one is enough for you. And then if we look at another part of the Quran, we see that God actually recommends that you only have one, because God says that you will never ever be able to be just or equitable towards between your wives. So one is the actual you can say recommendation from God himself. So why has Islam left it open, marrying more than one, is so if you find yourself in that situation again where there's for example, because of war, because of conflict, or for many other reasons, and there are in certain parts of the world, there are more women than men in certain countries. If they were to get married, if all the men were married, then what would happen with all of the other women that were not there? That either they will not be able to marry someone, or they will be left without marriage. And that's again their choice, or they would be married to someone who's already married. So what we find here is it's not a norm, but rather it's an exception. Yes, in certain cultures, in Muslim cultures, so for example, in the Middle East, in Arab culture, you would find that the people would marry more than one wife, and some of the women happily allow that, allow their husbands to get married again. However, in certain parts of the world, for example, in Pakistan, for example, by law, if a man wants to marry again, he has to have the permission from his first wife, and I don't see how successful that person will be to get a consent or permission from his first wife to get married again. So you will find it's very rare in these situations. And also in the prenuptial agreement, she can stipulate that if my husband was to have another wife, then I want a divorce from him, and he has to follow that through. So it's an exception, and it's not the norm. And you have to understand the context in which God allowed it as well. Does that answer your question?
Thanks. I assume that it is Rina.
Thank you. Yeah, that's fine. Thank you very much.
Next question is from Natia. We've seen the pigeons in the video. So what is the symbol of pigeon during the wedding ceremony?
Nothing. We know that doves and pigeons, they are mainly, in any, you can say, when we say lovebirds, or what do we have normally have pigeons or we have doves. Again, it's nothing as a symbol of anything in Islam. That was just you can say, an entertainment for the people that were there, with the pigeons. I remember going to a wedding, and there was actually they had a falcon, and the falcon had a ring. So the falcon was given a ring, and it was trained to do so. So that falcon flew from one side of the hall to the other side of the hall and gave the ring to the bride. So it doesn't signify anything. It's just an entertainment for the guests.
Thanks. Another question from Natia. What is the minimum legal age for marriage?
What is the, sorry?
Minimum legal age for marriage.
Oh, minimum legal age for marriage in Islam. When someone reaches the age of puberty, they would be, in any, for example, in any, to be responsible in Islam, to be in a state of responsibility for or accountability for anything, whether it's worship or whether it's any laws to be applicable to a person, the ages of puberty, and similarly with marriage. However, if we, for example, live somewhere where by law of the land, the legal marriage is there's a limit. For example, in this country, is 16, or in certain parts is 17 or 18. Then we have to abide by the law of the land. In certain cultures, there is, people do get married young. Even in some of the states in America, I was reading, there was an article, I think last year or a few years back, I was reading, there are some states in America as well that children as young as 12 were getting married. And I remember reading this article. So even in certain parts of the world, people are still getting married young. However, in Islam, you have to look at the whether the person can differentiate between what is right and wrong, whether they have life experiences, whether they are ready for marriage or not. And this is where the family of both the bride and groom play a role. If, for example, the children are too young, they can veto that proposal, and they can say, look, they're very young, they can't get married at this age, you have to wait until they are older. For example, historically, people would get married at a young age, and however, that was in historical times. And judging a culture based upon their norms in that history, it won't be fair if we apply our modern kind of understanding and culture upon them. However, coming back to the question is, the legal age would be after puberty, because one of the reasons is what? Procreation. So obviously after puberty, one is able to have children. However, because marriage holds a lot of responsibilities and duties, you have to look at the mental development of the person as well. Do they understand what they are getting into? Do they understand what marriage is? Are they able to fulfill one another's responsibilities? So what we would say if someone was to approach us, number one, you are living, the place that you are living in, you have to look at the legal age. And number two, you have to also look at whether that person is actually ready for marriage or not. Hope that answers your question.
Thank you. Yeah. Thank you so much.
The next question is from Pratibha. What if one of the spouses is non-Muslim?
So this, for example, what we do say is interculture and inter-community. So for example, we know that Muslim communities are very diverse. So interculture, inter-community, we do encourage a lot, to get married. So, in terms of non-Muslim, interfaith marriage is not very encouraged. One of the reasons for that is because, as you would have heard in the beginning, where we mentioned about the objectives of Sharia, was preservation of religion. and preservation of family. So one of the objectives, preservation of religion. So for example, if one of the spouses was not Muslim and they got married, it can become a point of conflict, maybe not at the time, but maybe in the future, when it comes to upbringing of the children. One spouse maybe want them to follow their way, the other one wants to follow their way. There can be a breakdown in marriage. There may also be a conflict of faiths. For example, at the time, the couple may say, no, I respect whatever you do, you respect whatever I do. But I'm not saying that this will happen, but in some marriages it happens. That one of the, for example, spouses, they want to become more closer in their religion or more devoted, and they feel that, because of that, they would want their children to follow that same way, or they would want their spouse to follow in that same. It can lead to conflict, and one of that reason again, so preservation of family will be in jeopardy. Number two, preservation of religion. So you want to pass on the faith to the future generation, so it lives on. So again, that objective of Sharia will also be in jeopardy. However, in terms of, there are interfaith marriages. So for example, with a limit. So for example, there is the permission of marrying people of the book. So that is Jewish and from Jewish background or Christian background. Other than people of the book, it will not be permitted for a Muslim to marry, whether that is man or woman. And there is, for example, in the Orthodox view, that this permission was only for the men to they can marry women from the people of the book. But again, that when we look at the context of that, this was in a time where in a society where there were not many Muslim women. But we see historically there have been interfaith marriages, and as Larry also touched upon in his last presentation, there have been historically interfaith marriages. But because of preservation of family and religion, because that comes under jeopardy of the objectives of Sharia, it will not be encouraged to. But cultural and inter-community, so both spouses are Muslim, but they're from different backgrounds in terms of culture, then that is encouraged to marry. Does that make sense? There is a reformist view, which is that there is no harm in interfaith marriage, but the Orthodox view is that there's conditions on this, but the reformist view is that it's fine.
May I ask a leading question on from there? And that is, you mentioned that people, if the other spouse is from one of the Abrahamic religions, then they can marry. But what if they aren't? Does that mean that the other person has to become a Muslim before they can get married?
Yes.
And what does that involve, becoming a Muslim? What does it involve?
All it means is that declaration of the Muslim faith, so meaning they believe in God, one God. They believe in the prophets, Prophet Adam being the first and Prophet Muhammad being the last. They believe in the revelations from God and the Holy Quran being the final. And the rest, belief is something in the heart. So it's not necessarily, belief is not something that is, you can say a person doesn't have to be practicing, if you know what I mean. Belief is something in the heart. So belief is treated differently to practice in Islam. What we do say is when someone practices their faith, this is just to show, and it's evidence that they belong to this religion. But belief is something within the heart, and we say belief is judged by God. So what we do say, someone, if they accept Islam, the minimum they do is that they believe in God and the Prophet Muhammad. The details of it is something separate to this basic principle. So yeah, so that's what it would be. The reason why Abrahamic faiths has been said is because there are common beliefs between Muslims and the Jewish faith and the Christian faith in terms of believing in God and believing in prophets and believing in revelation. And there are certain practices and there are certain things which are common between these three faiths. And for that reason, there is that permission given.
Thank you.
Does that answer your question?
Yes, it does. Thank you.
Thanks. I think, unless I missed the question, this was the last question. So I want to thank you again, Khurram, for yeah, Vina, do you have a question?
Yeah, I just want to ask, if somebody is Christian or Jewish, do they also have to convert to Islam?
If they, for example, if it's again, according to the Orthodox view, is the permission was given for men to marry that can marry women from the people of the book, so they wouldn't need to. If they do, obviously it's they'll have double of the reward, but they don't necessarily. But if a woman wants to get married, then the man would have to convert. And there was, again, a particular reason for this. It was to do with the preservation of religion. And because the man is seen, as I mentioned before, as qawwamun, the person is given the authority in the house because they have the responsibility of maintenance, of providing. And because they have that authority in the house, because they're paying for everything and they have that, there can arise a point where they compel the wife to follow their way, or compel the wife to change their religion, or compel the children. And because of that, and sometimes men can do that. I'm not saying all do, but it can happen. And again, we look at a historical context as well, where it was a patriarchal society when Islam began, and it had been a patriarchal society in many parts of the world until recently. So because of that, when the woman would get married, she would be totally under the rule of her husband, and it was as if she would be marrying the whole family of the husband as well. So she had less say in matters, and she could be compelled to change her religion. So in order to protect her, in order to preserve her faith and the faith of her children, it was said that she should not marry a non-Muslim man for that reason, and they should become Muslim. Whereas on the other hand, because as I said, the men had the authority, it was fine for them to get married, because there wouldn't be this element of the wife oppressing or making the man change his faith, or for that reason. But like I said, there is a reformist view now, which is saying, look, the times have changed, so interfaith marriages should be allowed. But the Orthodox view still remains there because of the two objectives of Sharia, which is preservation of religion and preservation of family. So anything that can arise that will break down the institution of marriage, or anything that can arise where someone's faith is in jeopardy, or they can lose their faith, or the future generation, their children can lose their faith, it's better not to go down that route.
Khurram, thank you for that wonderful detailed explanation.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Can I thank you on behalf of all of us for a very thoughtful, clearly presented talk. If I was an Ofsted inspector, I'd give you outstanding. So thank you very much.
Oh, thank you very
Khurram.
much.
I thought
I took too long, and mine was the longest. And
I'm also going to take this opportunity
thank you very much.
As many of you know, these series would never have happened without Oren.
Oren, thank you very much.
An awful lot of effort, speaking to people, organizing things, getting the IT up and running. Oren, thanks for making this happen.
Definitely.
Thank you, and thank you, Tony and Sarah, for helping to organize this.
Very good. Thank you.
Thank you,
Sarah.
Wonderful 5 weeks.
Thank you very much, everyone. Thank you,
our
Warren.
own impression of it. So I'm not going to give you mine, which is good. But on behalf of Sukkat Shalom Reform Synagogue, I just want to thank Redbridge Faith Forum for the honor of allowing us to host these events. It's been an absolute pleasure. I am sure that we've all learnt a lot, and we've come closer to each other and understood each other with greater respect. Our very best wishes to Redbridge Faith Forum for your continuing good work. And I'm going to close, if I may, because I think it's appropriate, with a Spanish farewell. Vayas con Dios. Go with God.
Thank you.
Thank you.
May God bless you all. Thank you very much.
Thank you very
Thank you, Warren.
Bye.
Bye.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Keep well. Bye-bye.
Bye. Take care.
Thank you.